The Galactic Military Academy's central training facility orbited a neutron star, its artificial gravity generators capable of simulating conditions from any registered world in the Federation. For most species, this was a marvel of engineering. For the Academy's medical staff, it was a constant source of work. Drill Sergeant Kravox, a hulking Tarkelian whose species had evolved on a planet with gravity 1.3 times galactic standard, stood before the assembled first-year cadets with his forearms crossed. His exoskeleton gleamed under the facility's harsh lighting, and his voice carried the weight of 3 decades of military service. Endurance training, he announced, his translator rendering his chittering clicks into galactic common. Each of you will complete a 50-kilometer march while carrying standard equipment. Your species' average gravity will be simulated. Failure means remedial training. Spinal injury means medical discharge. 200 cadets from 37 species stood in formation. Among them, near the back, stood Corporal Jackson Reed, the only human in his cohort. At 6 feet tall with an unremarkable build, he looked fragile compared to the towering Draconians, crystalline lithoids, and densely muscled Tarkelians surrounding him. Terra, one of the Draconian cadets, SHK, hissed to his companion loud enough for Jackson to hear. Gravity barely 0.98 standard. Might as well be floating. Mocking laughter rippled through several groups. Earth's relatively low gravity was a constant source of jokes. Humans were seen as weak, their bones hollow compared to species from higher gravity worlds. Kravox's antennae twitched with irritation. Silence. You'll respect every species in this academy, or you'll clean every latrine on this station with your tongues. The march began at dawn, or what passed for dawn on a station orbiting a neutron star. The artificial sun brightened incrementally, and the gravity plates beneath each cadet's designated path activated to their homeworld specifications. Jackson felt the familiar pull of Earth-standard gravity settle over him. Around him, others grunted as their own world's gravity took hold. A lithoid cadet, whose crystalline body had evolved on a 2.1 G world, seemed to sink slightly into the reinforced deck plating. The equipment was standardized, a 60-kilogram pack containing survival gear, ammunition, power cells, and field rations. For species from high-gravity worlds, this was manageable. For those from lower-gravity worlds, it was a calculated challenge. They marched. The first casualty came at kilometer 7. A Zentari cadet from a 0.7 G world collapsed, their chitinous backplates cracking audibly under the combined weight of their own body and the pack. Medical drones swarmed immediately, lifting them onto an anti-grav stretcher. By kilometer 15, 12 more had fallen. The Draconians were struggling, their powerful frames designed for short bursts of strength, not endurance. The lithoids, despite their density, showed fracture lines in their crystalline structures. Jackson maintained his pace, breathing steadily. The pack felt heavy but manageable. Around him, cadets who'd mocked humanity's low gravity now wheezed and stumbled. At kilometer 23, the unthinkable happened. SHK, the Draconian who'd laughed at Earth's gravity, took one step too many. There was a sound like splintering wood, his spine compressing under the cumulative stress. He went down hard, screaming in agony. His vertebrae hadn't shattered completely, but the compression would require months of regeneration therapy. Medical drones arrived within seconds, but the damage was done. As they loaded SHK onto a stretcher, his eyes met Jackson's. The contempt was gone, replaced by something resembling fear. By kilometer 35, half the cadets had withdrawn or been medically evacuated. The training facility's corridors were littered with exhausted, injured soldiers in training. Even Kravox seemed impressed by the attrition rate. This cohort is weak, he bellowed, his forearms gesticulating wildly. I've trained younglings tougher than you so-called warriors. Jackson kept walking. His legs ached, his shoulders burned from the pack straps, but he'd done worse during his summer spent working construction in Colorado. At 5,000 feet elevation. In 95-degree heat. This was just another Tuesday. He crossed the 50-kilometer mark at hour 7, 32 minutes. Only 17 other cadets finished. Most were from high-gravity worlds, though several looked ready to collapse. Jackson set his pack down carefully, rolled his shoulders, and waited for dismissal. Adequate, Kravox grunted, surveying the pitiful remainder of his cohort. Tomorrow, we double the weight. Groans echoed through the exhausted cadets. Jackson said nothing. The next day brought a new challenge, though it wasn't officially part of the training curriculum. The Academy's central marketplace had received a shipment of graviton-compressed building materials, massive blocks of condensed matter used for constructing the station's outer hull. Each block measured 2 meters on each side and weighed approximately 500 kilograms under standard gravity. A loading mech had malfunctioned, dropping one of these blocks directly in front of the main mess hall entrance during breakfast hours. Hundreds of hungry cadets were trapped inside, and the replacement mech wouldn't arrive for hours. Station engineers stood around the block, calculating. We could use plasma cutters to section it, one suggested. Too risky near the mess hall's atmospheric containment, another replied. Anti-grav clamps? 3 hours minimum to get them here from the depot. The crowd of would-be breakfast patrons grew increasingly agitated. Cadets who'd barely survived yesterday's march were now facing potential starvation or at least having to wait until lunch. Jackson had been passing by on his way to the training facility when he noticed the commotion. He assessed the situation with the practical eye of someone who'd spent summers working manual labor. 500 kilograms. Under Earth gravity, that was about 1,100 pounds. Heavy, but not impossible. The block was dense but had handles on each side for the loading mechs. He walked up to the block. "Excuse me," he said to the nearest engineer, a spindly cephaloid whose tentacles were wrapped around a datapad. "I can move this." The engineer's optical stalks swiveled toward him. "Cadet, this mass is beyond human capabilities. The density alone." "Just need to lift one end and pivot it," Jackson interrupted, already bending to examine the nearest handle. "Lever principle. Doesn't need to go far, just out of the doorway." Before anyone could stop him, or perhaps because everyone was too stunned to react, Jackson gripped the handle with both hands, planted his feet in a wide stance, and lifted. The block shifted. His legs shook. His back strained. Every muscle in his core engaged. But slowly, impossibly, one edge of the block rose from the deck plating. The crowd went silent. Jackson pivoted, using his legs more than his back, walking the block in a quarter rotation that left the mess hall entrance clear. He set it down carefully, brushing his hands on his uniform pants. "Should be good now," he said to the stunned engineer. Behind him, he heard a distinctive crack. A draconian cadet who'd attempted to help, thinking Jackson couldn't possibly succeed, had tried to lift the opposite corner. His spine had compressed instantly. The cadet lay on the deck, groaning, as medical drones swarmed once again. The cephaloid engineer's optical stalks quivered. That should have been impossible. Your species' bone density, your muscle mass, the compression force alone should have. Should have what? Jackson asked genuinely. Crushed your spine. Shattered your vertebrae. Ruptured your internal organs. The engineer's voice carried an edge of hysteria. The structural load was distributed across a skeletal frame evolved for 98 centimos. You shouldn't be standing. Jackson shrugged. Lifted heavier stuff back home. Helped my uncle move a piano once. That was a real pain. The crowd parted as Jackson walked toward the now accessible mess hall. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, compound eyes, optical stalks, photoreceptive membranes, and everything in between. That evening, Jackson returned to his quarters to find a message on his datapad. It was from Drill Sergeant Kravox. Corporal Reed. Report to my office. 0700 hours. Kravox's office was Spartan, decorated only with commendations and a holographic display showing troop formations. The Tarkelian gestured with one of his forearms for Jackson to sit. Do you understand, Kravox began without preamble, what you demonstrated today? I moved a block, sir. You lifted mass that should have killed you. I reviewed the station logs. That block weighed 512 kilograms. Under your species' standard gravity, that translates to forces that would rupture the spinal columns of 93% of Federation species. Jackson waited, unsure where this was going. Kravox leaned forward. Earth's gravity is low. But your species didn't evolve in low gravity. You evolved in an environment that demanded endurance, adaptability, and structural resilience. Your bones aren't hollow, they're designed for efficiency. Your muscles aren't just strong, they're tireless. He pulled up a holographic display showing comparative anatomy. A draconian can lift twice what you lift in a single burst. But ask them to carry weight for 50 kilometers? Their fast twitch muscles fail. A lithoid can bear tremendous static load. But ask them to move dynamically under stress? They fracture. The hologram shifted to show a human skeletal structure. Humans are persistence hunters. Your species didn't chase down prey by being faster or stronger. You chased them until they collapsed from exhaustion. You outlasted everything. Jackson had never thought about it that way. The Federation has always valued peak performance, maximum strength, maximum speed, maximum power. But warfare isn't about peaks, Corporal. It's about endurance. It's about who's still standing when everyone else has broken. Kravox stood, all four arms behind his back in a formal military posture. You're not weak because you come from a low-gravity world, Reed. You're dangerous because your species learned to carry the weight of survival across evolutionary time. While others specialized, humans generalized. While others optimized for their environment, humans learned to adapt to any environment. He extended one arm in a salute. I'm recommending you for advanced training in heavy assault operations. Every squad needs someone who can carry the weight when everyone else breaks. Jackson returned the salute, still processing. As he left the office, he passed a group of cadets in the corridor, including several who'd mocked him. They stepped aside, giving him space. One of them, a young Zentari whose exoskeleton still bore repair marks from yesterday's march, spoke quietly as Jackson passed. Respect, human. Respect. Jackson nodded and continued to the mess hall. He had training tomorrow, and training meant he needed to eat. Behind him, the Zentari turned to her companions. Did you hear? The human lifted the block to clean the floor. Just to clean the floor. Like it was nothing. The story spread through the academy that night, growing with each retelling. By morning, it had become legend. The human who lifted the impossible weight, just to do his chores.